Hello and welcome to my podcast, Become. My name is Sabine Kvenberg and I am your host. The content will inspire you to reach your aspirations and become the best version of yourself. I feature interviews with successful individuals from various industries delving into their personal and professional journey, how they overcame adversities, and the strategies they used to achieve their goals. We have to become the person we are meant to be first, so we can live the life we are destined to live. That also means we must overcome challenges and work through difficult times to learn, grow, and become the next, more fabulous version of ourselves. I'm so glad that you're here. Let's get on this journey together. Hello and welcome to another show of Become. My guest today, Katherine Lewis, is also an entrepreneur and fellow podcaster. And I'm so excited about this conversation because she has a lot of great things to share with us. Welcome, Katherine. And how are you today?
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I am doing great and I'm excited to be on the show.
Wonderful. If you don't mind, give our audience just a little brief introduction of who you are and what you do.
I am a software engineer and an accessibility champion during my day job. And then in the rest of my hours, I operate a nonprofit that works with high school students, helping them heal trauma. And then I'm also a podcast host.
Your nonprofit is so important in these days because the children, the youth, that's our future. That's the future of this planet. And when we can help them to rise up, to help them overcome any challenges or trauma, we can get them onto the right path. I love it. And I would love to know more about it. For 27 years, I had a performing arts school and I worked with a lot of children and youth. And I know for a fact that the children and teenagers that came through our school had a more likelihood of going in the right direction. And in some cases, the parents came to us saying, "We are so glad because she was about to go in the wrong direction. Now she was focused on performing arts and, getting the confidence she needs." So I know what it is. So now I would love to hear about your nonprofit organization.
Absolutely. We're called the Leon Foundation of Excellence. We've been in operation for 8 years. And as I mentioned, we're helping young people heal that intergenerational trauma. So the organization was founded on this idea that it takes a lot of bravery and courage in order to do this work, but it's necessary. And so when you look at our name, it starts with Leon or Leon, which is lion in Spanish. And lions tend to represent bravery and courage. And we want to help people build that foundation of excellence so they are getting started on the right foot. Now, there's not necessarily a specific definition of right, but we do know that it matters when we are healing these intergenerational patterns. Some folks aren't familiar with what that means, so I'll break it down. When we're talking about intergenerational patterns, we are addressing this idea that the generations that came before us have their own trauma, and they probably intended to do better than how they were treated by their parents and the previous generation, but we always make mistakes, right? And sometimes we swing too far to the other side. As an example, maybe someone had a parent who was really, really strict. Possibly even they brought out the belt. Who knows? Depending on your generation. You may swing to the opposite side when you're rearing your own children and you may say, sure, do whatever you want, go for it. Well, we need to be able to find a way to come back to the middle, right? And so it's this process of healing those patterns. And how do we develop skills where we can use nonviolent communication to resolve conflicts? We can use our leadership skills in order to stand up for ourselves and advocate for others. That's just a quick sampling of some of the skills that the students are working on, but we want to get them to a healthy place so that way by the time they're deciding where do I want to go study? What career do I want to have? Who is my partner going to be? That they're coming from a more healed place when they're making these really big life decisions.
How did you get to the point to start this nonprofit organization from, being an engineer? Was there like a connection that made you go that path?
The nonprofit was formed while I was in my senior year of college. I had the opportunity to do an independent study with one of our leadership professors. And it was through that independent study that I thought, well, I want to start a business. I want to start a nonprofit. And so he helped me in the process of forming the organization and coming up with a business plan. And then it was launched basically at the end of that semester. And then that summer, we started doing summer camps for youth who were on probation in the local area. And so that's logistically how it got started. And I had someone to help me out. But when we want to talk about the true origin story comes from a place of my own personal pain. We tend to develop products or solutions to problems that are painful. And so for me, I was raised with a pretty average childhood, but even in an average childhood, we still all have our misinterpretations, miscommunications, our stressful moments. And there's a difference between understanding life through the eyes of a child and that of an adult. I can look back now on how I was raised and certain events that happened, and I can have a lot more empathy and understanding. But when I was young and my needs weren't getting met, or I was being yelled at, or whatever was happening, those things were really painful for me. And I started to develop certain beliefs around certain messages that I held on that limited me and turned me from a place of, just being a young child where you're kind of innocent and you start developing these certain concepts. I'm unloved. I'm unworthy. I can't. I'm incapable. One of mine that was pervasive at the time is I'm a woman and so I can't do math and science, right? These different things that get ingrained in us.
What do you think happened that you started with that belief? I'm a woman, I cannot do math, or um,
Yeah. So at the time and kind of the culture when I grew up, that was a message. I couldn't tell you exactly where it came from, but that was just a message that I got is, oh, well, girls are supposed to do the soft skill things, the reading, the writing, guys do the hard skill things, the math, the science, right? And so somehow I kind of honed in on that and took that on and said, okay, this is going to be part of my identity. And so when I was younger, I wanted to be a quantum physicist. And that was something that I didn't pursue because I thought, well, I'm not going to be any good at those kinds of subjects. And so there are little things that we pick up, whether it's something that someone says or it's something that we are reading in magazines or we're seeing on TV. As we're developing, we pick these things up and we start to form this identity. And the thing that is unfortunate about it is once we latch onto something, we start looking for affirmation in our world. So if we believe that nobody likes us, then when we walk past someone, we smile at them and they don't smile back. We go, see, nobody likes me. I don't belong. But what if they just didn't see you, right? We never know their experience of life. And so having to go through and untrain myself to heal all of these things took about 13 years. I mean, really, life is always in progress, so it's still happening. But a big bulk of this work happened over the course of 13 years from the age of 13 to 26. And it was during that time where I was still in the midst of a lot of anger and a lot of pain that I thought, I'm kind of having to go through this and find my way. And I did have lots of mentors. I did have a therapist. I did have books. So I had resources. But even then, with those resources, I felt like I was trying to figure out, well, which resources are going to help me the most? And what do I even need help with? And so I know this is a longer answer, but this is where the origin of the nonprofit came from is this place of I kind of feel like I'm having to figure this out. And now that I've figured out some decent things, how can I share this with others so they don't have to figure things out by their own? on their own will and in a long amount of time. Let's shorten that timeline. And so it's always nice to share what we know. And that was the inspiration for forming the nonprofit.
And you're so right. When we go through certain experiences, we are able to share them and we have the empathy because we understand, because we went through it. You mentioned from age 13, you started figuring it out. And I mean, that is a very, very challenging age for any teenager going from becoming a child to a woman or a young man. That's by itself is very challenging. And what did you do when you were as a teenager to already started to figuring things out? Because oftentimes in the teenage years we may become rebels even. So how was it for you?
When I was younger, so even prior to 13, there was something that happened in my family. It was a pretty tragic incident that just kind of took my mom in particular, like emotionally away. And so she was very much trying to process those emotions. And my dad was trying to launch a company. And so he was focused on work. And this kind of started a process where I realized at an early age, okay, I need to figure things out. I kind of need to raise myself. Not to say I didn't have my parents, I definitely did. But from an emotional perspective, I needed to figure things out. And so I would observe and I would listen and I would tune in. And I started developing this emotional intelligence that led me to realize I can look around and I can see there's patterns in adults that I don't understand. And what I mean by that is not that I couldn't understand them, but it didn't make sense why you would interact, why you would engage in that way. So let me provide an example. I would start to see some adults around me who took on a victim mindset. They would want a better life, they'd want more for themselves. But then I'd watch their behavior and they wouldn't change. They wouldn't do anything. And it frustrated me so much. And I'm not saying that I was perfect at that either. None of us are. But I could just see this big disparity between what they were saying and what they were doing. And so I started to mature. I started to grow. I started to observe quite a bit and I started to get a little bit frustrated. Why do I understand these things? The people around me who have the ability to affect my life aren't. And so by the time I was 13, my parents had a divorce. And at that point in time, there were just a lot of behavioral patterns that were still continuing, particularly from my dad, that was affecting me. And I asked him to leave my life. And so we separated at that time. And it was over those 13 years that we didn't have a relationship and I was figuring things out. Luckily, I'm very thankful we were able to come back together, but that shows you just a little bit of what happened prior to 13.
Wow. I must say, well, first of all, I'm glad that you were able to figure things out with your dad and starting to heal that relationship. I am impressed because having already that thought that you described of seeing patterns in adults, and you were asking the question as a child. I mean, that's pretty impressive, I must say. So you're definitely an old soul. I would say that, right? What made you choose your profession that you're in now, being an engineer?
That's a great question. My career has pivoted a little bit, so that's why I appreciate this and we can dive in. I studied business in college and then I wanted to do something that was impactful and I felt at the time that business wasn't very impactful. I had kind of a calloused view of business that it's just about profit, it's just about taking advantage of people. And so I decided to go a different route and I went to work for Teach for America. For those who aren't aware of the program, it's where in the United States, and they do have the program in other countries as well, but particularly in America, you spend 2 years working in a low income area teaching at a school. And you can extend it beyond the 2 years, but that's your commitment initially. You obtain a master's degree in education and you are learning how to teach in class. So I taught second and third grade. And while I was doing that, I would have summers off, and I had the ability to work with an organization that taught high school girls how to code. Now, when I was presented with this opportunity, I was very much of a yes person. So it was like, yes, I'll do this, of course. But I had no idea how to program. And honestly, I was noticing some of those beliefs come back up within me of, I can't do this. And I had to take a moment and just say, no, we're going to figure this out. I'm just going to go for it, right? What's the worst that can happen? It's a 2 week summer camp. I'm going to give it my best. And so I learned how to program, and I loved it so much. I loved seeing what the girls were making. I loved seeing what I could learn and what I could build. And the other piece I loved about it is it's endless. There is so much to know about engineering, and it's constantly changing because technology in particular moves really, really fast. So
Yes, especially now with AI and everything. It's interesting that you talk about this new field that you wanted to explore. Earlier this year, I started a program to learn more about AI and all the possibilities we have now with open AI, ChatGPT, and many other platforms out there. And then it really got into programming, right? And here's one interesting thing that I noticed, and I think that has a parallel why some do it and some not. You said, I really enjoyed doing it. Now, when I did this program, I got very tired when it came to that point, and I got frustrated. And then I realized, this is not the zone of genius, and this is not what I'm enjoying. And I have to be okay with that. I like the creative part, I love to talk and to speak and to perform and help others and being engaged. But those very uh, particular things, I now understand that this is not my zone of genius, and it would just take time, and it's robbing me of energy and not giving me energy, and that is the big difference. So it's so great that we had that conversation, because we can see it depends on the person. But you figured out that this is what you really enjoy doing.
you bring up a really good point, though, that it does matter that we pay attention to what are we called to. And one thing I love to say is think about, what have people praised you for? What have people complimented you for? If they are complimenting you in areas of creativity and performance, then dive deeper into that. Ask yourself questions. Maybe that's the route for you to go. So, going back to my own story, I did 2 years of these summer camps and determined that I wanted to pursue this as the next step in my career. So, I did a boot camp. It went for 9 months. And then following that, I was hired as a software engineer
That's fantastic. And how long have you been doing this now?
for 4 years.
4 years. Fantastic. So, this is your day job. You have the nonprofit organization that you're running. You have the podcast. So, tell me about your podcast.
The podcast was formed a year ago in the spring, and it started from this place of, I love having conversations with people. And I know that everyone has a podcast now, but it wasn't to fill a niche or to turn it into a brand. I just wanted to be able to meet with people, and I wanted to be able to have insightful conversations. And whomever listens to it, that's fine by me. And I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. So I started this podcast. It's called Opportunity Made. And the whole premise is that regardless of who you are, where you come from, you're able to make any opportunity that you want. It might take you a little bit longer than the person you're comparing your journey to. It might move in a different direction. That's fine. But in the end, you can create whatever you would like. And so I have conversations with people who have overcome barriers and who have created new opportunities for themselves. We walk through their whole journey, sometimes going in depth, sometimes skimming over pieces, but there's always good nuggets in there that you can apply to yourself to say, wow, okay, it's simpler than I thought, or I just need to take it slower, or I need to be a little bit more consistent. Whatever that nugget may be, I just love diving deep into these conversations with folks.
Yeah, and that's what we do on this podcast too. Every guest that I have on my show just brings value to this community. And I started my podcast too last year, the beginning of June, and it grew tremendously. Now, we're over 3,000 downloads a month, and I love that it's just very organically growing, and, and people getting something out of it. And the premise of this podcast is too that we are not alone. We all go through challenges and challenging situations, and thank you for sharing the challenges you overcame, because that will help someone who listens to it to say, you know what, yes, I'm not alone. There are others who've done it or had gone through a situation. If you can give like your one or two tips or experiences, or what something that you would like to share with our audience that you think would be empowering and helpful.
I'm going to stay focused on the realm of relationships. If there's one thing that people may take away from this show, it's that you can restore lost relationships. And you'll see that in my journey as well. And there are two things that came from that. There are more, but I'll stick with two that really impacted me in being able to restore that relationship with my father. So the first one is going to be humility. And so, whenever we're in a relationship with someone, it can be a friendship, it can be a partnership, it can be parent and child, it doesn't matter. There's always going to be misunderstandings, right? Because we learn as we go through life, we gain new perspectives, we gain new experiences, we gain different context that helps us look back and go, oh, that's what actually was happening. Okay, I got it, right? And in order to restore, we have to come to someone with humility and say, I didn't have it all figured out. I apologize, right? And ask for that forgiveness. That's that first step, as well as forgiving them, right? We don't want to hold on to any grudges. And I know this sounds super maybe cliche or simple, but it honestly is so, so powerful, being able to forgive and being able to say, I'm sorry. And then the other piece is accepting people as they are. So when I was younger, I kind of painted my dad out to be this bad person, right? He was like the bear that was coming after me. And while there's moments that, yes, like things did happen poorly and they could have gone better, there's a lot of things that I didn't understand about who he was and why he was doing what he was doing. And so when I was going through this process of healing and came to this place of forgiveness, I just had to say, all right, he's not going to be the person that I want. And that's okay. I'm just going to love him for exactly who he is. And then I'm also going to create boundaries. If I know that I can't interact with him in a certain way, I'm not going to. Or if I know that I can't rely on him to fill a certain need, I'm not going to. So I need to put those boundaries in place for myself so I still stay sane and okay, but I'm going to accept him and I'm going to love him as he is. And we're going to engage in whatever capacity we can. And then through, sorry, just to wrap that up, just through doing that, I will say that the last couple years that we've had our relationship restored, I have now been able to have conversations with him and understand him to be a much, not completely different, but different enough person than I saw him before. And that helps me forgive even more, to remove even more boundaries, to love him even more. And I think the most important piece with a father daughter relationship is to like him. I've always loved my father, but now I like him for who he is as a person. And that's a big, big deal.
Oh, yeah. And thank you so much for sharing. These were really two golden nuggets. I think everybody who listen to this podcast, who is on this planet, we have to work on it. That's just human behavior, and those are the challenges we all face. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. Now, if someone wants to uh, know more about your foundation, perhaps they wanted to get involved in one way or another, how can they do that?
So you can visit leonfe.org. So that's Leon, F as in foundation, E as in excellence.org. You can volunteer, you can mentor, you can donate, you can share it with any teenagers in your life who may need some assistance. We have a free leadership course on there. It's 30 modules long, and they can start it whenever they like. It's self-paced, and they can go through activities and videos to do some of this inner work. It's not therapy, but it does get them started in just reflecting, developing emotional intelligence, developing that self-awareness. So highly encourage anyone to share that with young folks that they know. And then obviously you can listen to Opportunity Made on Apple, Spotify, any of the other platforms, and you can find me on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. It will also be in the show notes. So thank you so much, Katherine. It was a very delightful conversation, and all the best for you and your organization.
Great, thank you.
That was my interview. And if you enjoyed it, give us a 5-star review, leave a comment, and share it with your friends. Thanks for listening. Until I see you again, always remember, serve from the heart, follow your passion, and live the life you imagine.